We're talking with the founder and CEO of Zoho, a different kind of species of software company. And I mean that in the best way. I want to introduce Sridhar Vembu. He is the CEO and the founder of Zoho. Sridhar, how are you? And welcome to CxOTalk.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm really happy to be here today.
Please tell us about Zoho.
Well, you said interesting, different species of software company. That's exactly right. Zoho, we are a cloud software company at one level, and we call ourselves the operating system for business. And really what's different about Zoho is that we provide an end-to-end suite of software covering all aspects of business to our enterprise customers. So that is really that end-to-end focus on that. And along the way, we also have built a company in a very different way. And just one aspect of it, it's entirely bootstrapped, no outside money, no outside investor. It's still private after 23 years. That has some interesting implications that we will talk about today.
I will also mention that I have been using Zoho for a while now, and you have an extraordinary number of modules. You're a very, very large suite of software.
Yes.
The number of modules that you have is pretty amazing. So tell us, how do you organize, or how do you think about that broad set of modules? You're covering a lot of territory.
That's one of the more unusual things about Zoho, as you mentioned. Really, these were all organically built over the last 15 or 16 years of the product's existence now. So it didn't come all overnight. And this has taken a long-term effort and commitment to R&D. And that is how these products were born. And now the Zoho suite, if you go to zoho.com, you will see over 40 individual applications, and then another maybe about 60 or 70 mobile apps along the way. So it's a full suite covering all aspects from sales and marketing, customer experience, internal collaboration productivity, HR and finance, analytics, all of it. That's what really distinguishes Zoho from everyone else.
Also, the modules cover a combination of, can we say, back-end processes like finance or HR, as well as extremely customer-facing front-end processes like you say, CRM, marketing, things like that.
In fact, we flip it around and say it gives you a customer centricity. We revolve everything around the customer, and then we build out the internal processes around all of this. So that's also what is special. So it is enterprise software built with the customer first, and then how everything that to support that customer, all the internal processes around it.
I want to remind everybody that we're speaking with Sridhar Vembu, who is the CEO and founder of Zoho. Sridhar, we've been talking about kind of the scope of coverage, the broad scope of applications, modules that Zoho includes. How did you start? I'm hesitating here. I'm trying to think how's the best way to ask the question. So, why did you start Zoho? But more importantly, what is the kind of mission? Because you haven't accepted VC money, that the company's worth a lot of money as a result of the growth. Why?
In the beginning, if you go back to the beginning of the company, we saw an opportunity to build a new kind of software, and that's the initial when we had nothing on. We just started writing code, and there wasn't a big vision of where we were going to get to, but there was a mission, and I distinguish the two. The mission was to be a good company, try to do good by both employees and customers, and stay long term. That was actually there from the very beginning. From almost day one, I'd say that the company's real mission was to treat employees well, customers well, and stay in business long term. We didn't have a vision of what we were going to build, and that came in the process of building it. The vision itself got established over a period of time. As we built more and more software, We saw more opportunities to integrate them. We saw opportunities to solve problems we didn't think of in the beginning. That is how the whole software suite evolved.
One of the things that struck me when I first started using Zoho, I think a lot of people think about Zoho as being primarily CRM, and obviously that's very important to you. But I was really, again, I was struck by the extent of the coverage that you have. And I think I cannot think of any other software company outside of really large, large ones like Oracle or SAP that even approach the kind of coverage that you include.
And that is absolutely true. And in fact, we have about 7,000 employees. And at our size, I think it's safe to say no one else has that level of breadth and depth.
I'd like to talk about that mission that you were just describing. So you talk about doing good and being a good company, but I think, let's face it, in Silicon Valley, every company says, we are going to change the world and we're going to do great things for the world. And a lot of times, frankly, as we all know, it's just, it's nonsense. So for you, how do you evaluate your own efforts to that metric? How do you know that you're accomplishing that goal, doing good and being a good company?
So this actually goes back to, in the beginning, obviously, for every company, the first existential question is, why should we exist? Do we need to exist? Does the market want us to exist? That is that initial existence question, or I'll translate it as, how do we put food on the table? And once you get past that stage, you achieve a measure of success. And I define that as being self-sustaining. You're profitable enough to keep going. And people achieve a level of success. Then the real, the question of mission starts to dawn on you. What is it all for? Well, now that I have reached here, where do we go? Why do we exist still? And in fact, people who are very success focused, or they have financial metrics, like we want to achieve $100 million in sales or $1 billion in sales or whatever, then tend to never think about that mission question. And then what happens is, once they reach that goal, suddenly they become purposeless in a way, goalless. And at some point, for anybody, even the most financially minded people, it turns out that the money alone cannot motivate you. It loses that whole ability to motivate. And then it just dawns on people, no, oh my God, I've gotten here, but I don't know where I go from here. And that is actually something that I understood early on in our existence, that I felt that unless we had a mission, this whole thing is not worth doing. Money alone cannot motivate you long haul. And I do mean long haul here. We have been in business now 23 years now, and we still keep going. To keep going that way, you have to have something bigger than only money. And this is not to say money is not important. Obviously, we are a business. We have to keep the doors open. We have to pay our employees. We have to take care of customers. All that requires money. But money alone cannot be the purpose. And that is where it brings the mission question.
For you, then, what is that purpose?
We actually have defined it in two ways. There is an internal and there is an external in this. But externally, we want to be a company that customers really love and they feel we are part of their success and want to stay on long term with us. So we take care of them so well that they really take us for granted. We want to be there as part of their daily work. And that is how, and say, in fact, our website, we say, your life's work powered by our life's work. And we really do mean it. So we have done our life's work to be able to power our customers' life's work. And that is the external focus. Internally, I also have a goal that we want to treat people well and provide well-paying jobs that people can, live on well and stay with us long term. And that is important to me in two ways. One is, I look at the company as a kind of an extended family in a way. That it is not, I don't look at people as resources that are temporarily there to do something for us and then their thing is over and they move on. I look at people as we want to hire people so that we can keep them. And we have done a good job long time on this. Our attrition rate is actually quite low. I'm really proud of it. This plays into both ways. So people who stay with us long term go on to serve customers long term, and the customers stay with us long term. So it actually becomes over time something more than a company. It becomes a community. There's human element comes in now. It's not only about the bottom line, the quarterly statements, all of that. And that's something that a lot of people say it, but you have to live it. And to be able to live it, you have to have that long-term focus. So that is the mission part here. We have to take care of people well. Along the way, do something good for the world, and in a small measure of good that we can do. And that is where our initiatives like Zoho University come in, where we provide an alternative educational model. And that's like the third leg of it. So there's employees, there's customers, and there's a broader community.
What you're describing is in stark contrast to the typical Silicon Valley way of doing things, which is let's raise money from VCs, let's sell as much stuff as we can as fast as we can possibly do it, and then let's flip the company like real estate. And so why? Why do you have this? It's obviously a personal thing. Why? Why not do it the standard way?
At some point, actually, we had to face that question ourselves. And long time ago, this was actually very early on in our history, there was a company that came to acquire us. And this was, I'm talking about the previous bubble, that 1999, 2000, that bubble. And we got offered at that time, what seemed like lots of money. And we had to face that existential question, why not sell? Then why do we stay in business? We can take the money and run, right? And I actually posed this question to my co-founders. I asked that question. So what, we can now sell, we can make lots of money and we can move on. Who wants to do that? Actually, nobody wanted to do that. Then I asked, so I'll never ask this question again because we are now committing for life here. And let's just agree to this, right? And no regrets. And our people, my co-founders all voted, yes, this is what we want to do. Then, that's it. Then it's like a one-time decision and we never looked back at that question again. So we made up our minds and that's it. We are going all the way now.
You committed for life?
Yeah, that's how I think about it. Committed for life. It's funny when you think that way, but then the company itself is evolving with life goals. You think of it that way. So the company is part of the life process. It's not separate from you in that sense. Like whatever life things that are interesting, whether Zoho University came later, like I have an interest in education, so Zoho University become part of company's mission. And so, in other words, whatever interests then become part of a company's mission. And this we can afford because it's a private company. We have no external shareholders. No one controls our destiny. Then it's our life missions, life objectives become part of the company's mission too. Then.
In fairness, I have to also mention that you've been described as a billionaire. So apparently the financial part has kind of worked out okay as well.
Well, if I never think of myself that way because I separate myself from the company's wealth in that sense. Actually, that's a true answer. I look at, there is actually where I come from in India, there is Mahatma Gandhi made this point. Mahatma Gandhi is an interesting person, right? He was never a socialist. He never had any interest in it. But he also advised the capitalists, think of your company as something you hold in trust for a future generation. That's what he said. You are really a trustee of whatever things you own, the wealth you own, because and that way you think of it as an organic, long-term living entity rather than some exploitable resource. That's what Gandhi said. Actually, this is this part about Gandhi is not well known. I actually have come to accept that as my own goal. Not that I started out that way, I never thought about these things, but now I realize there is a lot of wisdom in what Gandhi said about this.
Are you a meditator?
Somewhat. I wouldn't say I'm a serious meditator, but my preferred meditation is just sit there and stare at infinity for a long period of time.
We have some questions from Twitter. Sal Rasa asks a question that's actually really important, and I want to talk about this. Let's talk about customer experience. Sal asks this question: how do you gather and access customer needs to enhance the customer experience?
This is a very important one. Actually, the more and more and more we are coming to the awareness that the entire purpose of business is to create a customer and keep a customer happy, right? The customer experience should drive all. Customer is the reason we are in business. And this is sometimes forgotten in a very sort of a productionist or production-oriented systems where our job is to produce something and throw it over the wall and somebody will buy it. That is not the understanding now, and customer experience dominates because we are in a lot of, let's face it, modernity at about we are in a post-scarcity world about a lot of material goods, software, a lot of this. It's not like there's any scarcity of all these things. So the whole emphasis shifts towards the customer, and the customer experience has to dominate all aspects of how we run a business. And that is actually part of how we, that's really how we have thought about the Zoho software suite. That's why, we are known for CRM and the customer experience. We knit the whole software, the whole suite around that customer experience.
Do you have formal mechanisms for gathering? I mean, I guess every software does, but let me put it this way, as you're thinking about the operations of the company and the definition of product features, how does customer experience come into play?
If you look at, we engage, maybe thousands of tickets per day in terms of our engagement with our customers around the world. And then we have these events everywhere now. In fact, as we speak, there are events going on in UK, and there's one in Dallas. And so around the world, these events where our people go live, meet customer one-on-one. We have an active customer advisory board now. Then we conduct these online community meetups. So feedback pours in from all these channels, all of these. And then we integrate and synthesize. And a lot of our product management strategy vision is how do we keep evolving the product suite so that we can meet a growing customer need and the evolving customer need. And so there is an internal drive for this. We identify some areas that we need to work on. And then it's all this feedback that's driving this process. That is how we keep the company agile and very responsive to the evolving marketplace.
Let's go on to another question. And Gus Beckdash is asking a question. A little bit of automation here or there means you've transformed without re-architecting processes or making structural changes. He says, how would you educate them and what examples would you show them?
This actually, I think I got the gist of it. And I often say this to customers. In fact, I've said this exact thing to CIOs. You have to, we are very proud of our software, but not even our software. Nothing you can just turn on and then get magical results unless the organization, the culture, all of this is already ready for it or willing to transform itself for it. Being mere software, no one's software, nobody's, can fix a broken organization. That's very important. In fact, this is the cultural element, the org culture, all of that is the critical part. Once you have all those in place, and software can help try to get some of them in place, but still the org transformation is still a broader goal than only the set of tools that you use. And then the organization can then be much more responsive to the customer and to the market and ship better products, offer better services, all of that. But for that, it is important to get the organization culture right. Then the software tools work with you to enhance your efficiency there.
To what extent following up on that, to what extent are you involved with your customers as they are going through these transformation journeys, or is it distant and you supply the software and then they take care of their change and that's?
I mean, multiple modes. There are customers who use us tactically. There are customers who use us strategically. When they are using us strategically, we get engaged quite a bit. I get involved in many of these conversations. And of course, we're 7,000 people, so there is a lot of these going on simultaneously. And so the good news is more and more customers have come to see Zoho as a strategic part of their organization technology infrastructure. And that's where we come in with, we share what are the best practices that we have seen, and we share our tips. And I also, along the way, always emphasize, you have to get your org culture right. Don't assume that any software is like a magical thing that you can just turn on and everything will work for you, because then you have to get the culture right in order to get the maximum value out of any software.
We have another question from Twitter, and this is from Cube Yogi, leader in Zoho Solutions and Zoho Partner. And he asks, what is the secret sauce of the, and this is a quote, magical, unmatched depth, magical, pretty good, unmatched depth and breadth of 40 plus enterprise apps of Zoho, which no other enterprise organization has been get to. Okay, he's a fan. What's the secret sauce of how do you build this stuff?
This kind of software, it's difficult to build. I mean, that's why not a lot of people build it. And it requires a particular organization culture, a particular way of thinking to be able to build this. And it's not purely about the software talent, even though, of course, that's a vital ingredient, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond the technical talent involved. And let me explain that a little bit. So the org culture in Zoho is one where there is both a lot of autonomy across our product lines and our divisions, at the same time a sense of shared values. And this is important because without the autonomy, people cannot move fast and produce all of this. If everything is centralized, all the decision making is, like for example, people are waiting on me for crucial decisions, they cannot actually move fast. But if, when you do this, when you just say this without the shared values, what happens is a lot of organizations with that autonomous mode of execution then start to work at cross purposes. It doesn't gel together. To bring that together is a cultural shared sense of values issue and not merely just, and this is where this is a very interesting topic. A lot of organizations think of their things in terms of professionalism. And I liken this analogy. When you don't have a culture, it's sort of you throw people, professionals, talented people together, you get the culture of a people in a bus going someplace. I mean, I use that analogy because obviously there is no such thing as a culture of people on a bus going to someplace. A driver takes them somewhere. A lot of organizations think that way, where you assemble a bunch of professionals and then there's somebody driving them someplace. There isn't that shared culture or shared values there at all. It never builds up. And when you think of people as replaceable resources, that bus, people get on and get off the bus and the driver is still driving somewhere. So that is how the culture becomes that kind of unculture then. And with that, I don't believe that you can build this broad suite because it will start working at cross purposes. So to do this, you have to have a sense of shared values.
When you say that the risk is working at cross purposes, can you elaborate what you mean by that?
Yeah. So we have, all these products, 40 different products. Inevitably, there will be product overlaps, and this piece needs to talk to that piece. And this product management group has to be in sync with another product. A lot of this, it cannot happen just by command and control, me ordering everyone to just obey. That cannot work. As systems get larger and we have smart people, it cannot work. So people have to have a shared mission. And what is the purpose of this suite? How does it work together? And then, make often what seemingly sacrifices for the common good. That is important. Without it, you cannot build this kind of a product suite.
We have a very relevant question to this from Arsalan Khan, who says, how did you break through the culture of your first customer or your first customers when you were just a beginning startup?
Good story. We went to a trade show in Las Vegas. I remember I was there. And we had a tiny booth, like a 10 by 10. That's the smallest booth there. And we met a few customers and we showed them demonstration. And it turned out, we didn't know this at that time, it turned out that a particular set of customers, at that time printer manufacturers, and they were interested in our software. And it turned out the reason was they were competing with HP in printers. HP was strong in software. These companies were not strong in software. They needed a partner. So we happened to have the right product for them. So that is how we found the first customers. So you always, the lesson here is you have to find some niche somewhere, a pain point somewhere that you have to address it. Then you get the first customer because they are taking a risk with you. In this case, they had a reason to take the risk because they needed the software and their competition had it. They didn't have it, so they came to us.
On this topic of the breadth of coverage, one of the things that I've seen over time, because I've known of Zoho and have tried and used the products over the course of many years, is I've noticed that the support is getting better, bugs are getting better, but still support is not even across all of these products. And some of the products are really polished and others are less so, and then some have more bugs and some have less. So how do you maintain consistency?
This is a good question. And all software takes a sort of a maturation life cycle. So you have to mature over time, and it's not, you cannot just turn on and instantly everything is perfect on day one. And we are a learning system and we constantly refine and adapt. And speaking of support, actually in the last 2 years, our fastest growing teams in the company have been support, and we put in a lot of resources. And it shows because our actually customer satisfaction is really massively improved. And it also has helped the product to get better because when support people are constantly engaging with the customer, talking to them, they get ideas on what we should be doing better in terms of even the product. How do we avoid having this problem with the customer in the first place? So it's one thing to put a support person to solve the problem. Another thing is to help avoid the problem for the next customer. So all of this has gotten better. And you are right, because we are constantly doing new software. And as it comes in, there is initial learning cycle that we go through. And then we get better rapidly. And in fact, that maturity cycle is accelerating because now the initial quality gets better now because we have the experience. And a lot of the software now goes through extended periods of both internal and what we call charter customer testing, where some customers who really need it adopt it first and give us feedback. And only after we get 50 or 100 customers, we actually launch it in the market. So all these are the ways in which we are improving that whole initial quality, initial customer satisfaction.
How do you balance flexibility with quality? For example, I submitted for one of your products, Zoho Flow, which is sort of similar to Zapier. I submitted a request and they actually added some feature that I needed. I was really surprised, in fact, and it was great. But that kind of responsiveness and agility, responsiveness to customers and agility can create its own set of problems because in the zeal to get it done fast, it's like, okay, great, we have this new feature, but it doesn't really work. So how do you balance that?
Really good one. And what tends to happen in this is when a product is relatively new, it doesn't have a lot of customers. At that time, actually, you can move faster. The teams also have a lot of, in effect, they are working for the initial customers. So they tend to move faster. As a product gets mature, two things happen. One is because it has already had tens of thousands and millions of users, it gets sanded to more perfection because any problem that you encounter, somebody else, odds are someone else already would have encountered that would have been addressed in product management or engineering or support one way or the other. So you are less likely to find more obvious issues. So at that point, necessarily the system also has to slow down. We cannot be making changes and risk breaking something for the millions of users. So there is that is how it naturally, that cycle works, where the products that are newer tend to evolve faster. The products that are more mature tend to evolve slower. What we also do in the cloud, there is a major benefit. We actually turn on some new features only to some customers at a time. And again, I mentioned the charter customers, where let's say a customer badly wants a feature. We'll tell them, would you mind if we turn it on for you, but you would accept that this may have some breakages, but you tell us what works, what doesn't work. So we turn it on for a few customers with their permission, and then validate it for a long period, and then go to the broader market, turn it on for everyone. The cloud actually gives us that natural advantage that way. In fact, we ourselves are the first customer for most of our products. So what it means is we have 7,000 employees. So things tend to get a lot of internal feedback before anything goes out.
Given, again, continuing on the breadth of the coverage, you have so many products. To what extent are you personally able to be involved with each of these products, and to what extent are you, hands off, having delegated and managing the broader aspects of the company?
It really depends. I actually work hands-on some things. Obviously, I cannot work hands-on on everything. And the reason I actually have a hands-on on some technology areas is so that I stay honest and I stay grounded. Because I remind myself, what is our business? I mean, we are in software. I need to know software. So I keep track of this, in one or two initiatives myself. And the good thing here is, if you look at our senior managers, they've been with us 15 years, 20 years, 21 years. So it's very common. So they effectively run their own businesses very well. And I mentioned there is a lot of shared values, so that they will bring to me maybe a difficult philosophical question or maybe a strategy question, but they will solve a lot of the other questions themselves. So that is what allows the system to scale. If everything has to wait for my input, we can never scale this way.
What is the role of the culture in being a self-correction mechanism? I'm not being clear. To what extent does the culture help people in the organization who are owning these products self-correct their behavior, their decisions?
So every one of our product groups are constantly in touch with customers. And of course, customers now speak up. There's support, there is Twitter, there is social media, all of these things, the feedback pours in. And senior managers, myself, we are constantly looking at the Twitter streams, and any critical feedback posted, you can be very sure that gets attention from a lot of senior people. Not just me, but a lot of other people. So that actually keeps us honest. Whenever somebody says something critical of us, that we know that there is, we have some issue to address, and that gets attention, and that is an internal feedback mechanism. And this is actually, the customer is a better boss than me, because then, the senior managers already know who they have to address, who they have to speak to keep happy. It's not the CEO, but it's the customer. So that is the natural internal self-correcting mechanism.
You've been in business for longer than almost all software companies.
23 years.
23 years. Very few software companies that have been around for that length of time. And so how do you prevent complacency and arrogance to infect the company?
That's an excellent question. Actually, this comes from hiring, and I've always said that my preferred first, I want to hire people who are of humility and contentment. These two are values that even for the company, that humility and contentment are essential, and we try to reflect that in our marketing. All of these, because that's, you're exactly right. In fact, once you succeed, more and more arrogance, institutional arrogance, becomes a major issue for any company, and that's something we have to battle. The good thing is, our people are actually almost to a fault, almost humble to a fault. That's actually a hallmark of the company, and that helps to stay grounded. And we also always, one of the things that grounds you is if you're constantly receiving this customer feedback. This is literally a true story. Just this morning, just before this call, I actually had an email exchange with a customer who had an issue, and I linked them with our support people. I linked them with a customer empathy person to call that customer. So that keeps me grounded too. That, you cannot get very arrogant when you actually are in the line of fire, line of duty every day. So
we're soon going to be running out of time. So this is the part of the show where I have to ask you to answer relatively quickly, because I have a whole lot of things left to talk with you about, but we only have a limited amount of time. So you just mentioned you have a customer empathy person. What is that?
Yeah. So there is inevitably, when you are handling thousands, tens of thousands of requests, there will be a certain number of customers we let them down. We don't actually do this right. And we have a group that actually scans our tickets. And of course, they are alerted through AI or whatever, they scans. And then whenever they see some customer is not getting supported well enough by our standard, they immediately intervene. They call the customer, they talk to them, they apologize, and they try to set things right. So we have that group. And that group also, in fact, the good news, I was talking to our customer empathy person, and she said, actually, I don't have a lot to do these days. Actually, this volume of things have gone down for me to do. And I said, that is good. You are the one person I don't want to keep too busy, I told her. So,
all right, we have another question from Twitter, and this is from Sam Kumar. And he's asking about the future, so you can see how comfortable you are answering this. As you enter large enterprise markets, are you seeing a requirement for speech analytics and workforce management?
the workforce management we have seen, and we are doing a lot more with the AI Zia, and where we are working on all these projects. And the workforce management, actually, we have now products in that line of two. There is actually something called Workerly that is in sort of trials now. So yes, we are definitely seeing these requirements.
Looking forward into the future of Zoho, can you share with us what are you working on? Where are you going?
Yeah, we are looking for constantly ways to enhance our own. How do we build software faster, higher quality, security? A lot of these are, in other words, as we built all the software, we have gained more experience in the nature of software development itself. And we are looking at that and on a foundation level and see how do we, so there's the triangle of, there is productivity in terms of development, and there's software quality in terms of what the customer, the quality of the software, and then there's security. And we believe that there are some techniques available to make all three better at the same time and improve productivity, improve quality, and of course, make it more secure. So these are the things that we are working on at a fundamental level. And these innovations will flow through all our products. The customers will benefit. And ultimately, we also have a philosophy in business where we believe that as these innovations make us better, make us more productive, we also should pass on the savings to the customer. The customer should benefit from better software at better prices. And that is a critical thing for us because we want our software to be affordable to every business on the planet.
Let's finish up with advice. You're, as I said at the beginning, you're a very different species of software company than most of the Silicon Valley ones that are out there. What advice do you have to entrepreneurs?
There's actually, I don't like to give advice because it really depends on what the internal goals are. I'm not talking about externally stated goals. People have to go into their own person and ask, who am I? What is my goal? What is my objective in this business? Why am I here? And they have to answer that question themselves, honestly. They have to face themselves and answer that question. And so let me advise the kind of person who will answer the question this way. If they want a mission-centered company, they want a company for the long haul, all of these. And it's actually okay not to be that. I mean, I don't judge people who say, I want to make lots of money and I want to sell the company. That's not, it's not for me to advise them on this. But I will say that if you share the things I share, then I can provide you advice. And the advice is you stay long-term focused and you are able to then direct your short-term activities steadily towards alignment with the long-term. And if you have the time, give yourself that runway that, we have 23 years. We have been in business. I hope to be around for another 25 years or longer. And that means that you have a lot of runway to think about these problems long-term. And it also allows you to build a company differently. For example, you might do something to pay the bills today, but you might have a mission that evolves in a different direction. that you have the ability to do that. For example, Amazon is a retail company that also became a leader in AWS in the cloud. That kind of transformation is possible if you think long term.
Can we drill into, you just made what I think is maybe the fundamental point, which is asking the question, why do I exist as a business? Why am I here? Can you elaborate on how an entrepreneur can even begin to approach that question in a really honest and penetrating way?
The really honest way is very important because it ultimately goes to the who am I question. It's a spiritual question, really. Who am I? And why am I here? And this, honestly, I'll tell you, there is no guidebook to answer this. This is why whether religions, philosophers, or spiritual gurus, all of them exist for this, to face up to this. So I don't, I would not, I'm not arrogant enough to think that I have any insight into this. But people have to answer this first. And they have to be honest with themselves, because a lot of times when we try to answer it, we are trying to answer it for some other person or what would impress them. But we have to actually think for ourselves, why am I here? And if you answer that question, you come up with it. I've told you that there's no formula or any way to answer this. But maybe you read, maybe you reflect, and a lot of these techniques could provide you some insights, and you have life experiences that will provide you insights. But that is the critical one before you know where you can take a company. That who am I question is very important to answer, to have an idea of, before you can answer what is my company here for.
I think probably maybe even many entrepreneurs listening to this and saying, oh, this is not relevant, because I'm just trying to build a business. But I absolutely think that this is the fundamental.
And as I said in the beginning, maybe no one has to ask the question because you're just trying to keep the doors open and you're just trying to survive. But these things come to the fore, particularly when you succeed. That's when this question becomes much more important. And if you have no idea, if you never thought about it while you are trying to make that living, then you feel more lost, actually. So even as you are going through the day-to-day struggles of keeping the doors open, it is good to have a glimpse into our inner selves and ask, why am I here? So that's why I say you have to start asking it earlier than later. I mean, people say, okay, I'll figure out all these after I make it. Well, then what is making it? So that's why it is important to ask the question ahead of time.
This is the important question for durable success in business. We're pretty much out of time, but we have one more, very quickly, I'll ask you one more question from Twitter, which just came in, which I think is interesting in the context of what we were just discussing. And this is from Sanjeev asks, do you consider Zoho as a Silicon Valley product or a hardcore Indian product?
We consider ourselves a good product. So I actually try not to define these in such terms, because these are, Silicon Valley connotes certain things. And we, as you said in the very beginning, we are a unique animal. And in fact, to be honest, a lot of inspiration came from places like Japan, where a lot of companies have thought long term. I'm actually, right now, I'm in front of this Sony camera, and this particular technology I've studied their R&D. They've been working on this R&D for 40 years on these, which is why it's still world class, right? That's the kind of company that I get inspired by. So you can say maybe a company based out of India and Silicon Valley with a lot of Japanese inspiration. How does that sound?
Sounds pretty good. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I wish we had time to continue. Sridhar Vembu, CEO and founder of Zoho, thank you so much for taking your time today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. You have been watching CxOTalk. We've been speaking with Sridhar Vembu, who is, again, the CEO and founder of Zoho. Before you go, subscribe on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Just hit subscribe at the top of our menu bar. Thanks so much, everybody. We have amazing shows coming up, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.